Morning Glory, America. Hugh Hewitt bringing you Pete Buttigieg music as New Hampshire comes closer and closer. Buttigieg in a virtual dead heat, but I believe the winner in New Hampshire, and all eyes now turn to the Granite State, despite there being other news. Donald Trump is acquitted. Yesterday's story. The Wuhan coronavirus continues to rampage. 565 people are dead in China, 2 elsewhere, 28,000 at least infected, with 1,305 recovered. We'll bring you the update on that. But the story is New Hampshire, with 2 brand new polls out this morning. From the Boston Globe, Bernie Sanders is leading with 25% over Pete Buttigieg at 19, Joe Biden at 15. I believe, no, at 12, and Elizabeth Warren at 11. And in the Emerson poll, Bernie Sanders has 31, Buttigieg has 21. Biden and Warren are tied at 12, Klobuchar at 11. Joining me to discuss all this, Jake Sherman of Politico, one of the better political reporters in the country. Good morning, Jake.
Good morning, Hugh. How are you?
I'm great. I do think that the Buttigieg campaign is like the Monkees opening song for those of a certain age. They've come to New Hampshire. They're considerably younger than every other Democrat in the field. I mean, by a lot. And they're having fun. I think they're having fun. I think they won Iowa. What's your assessment?
Well, I actually kind of believe, and maybe I'm wrong here, but I kind of believe that it doesn't actually even matter to win Iowa from a momentum point of view, because we're now entering our third day past Iowa without actually any results. So, yes, for all intents and purposes, he won Iowa. He's taking it into New Hampshire, and he's trying to create momentum by saying he's the winner, and he's done a good job of doing that. But listen, I think it's going to be really, really interesting, A, to see how he finishes in New Hampshire, but B, to see what happens in the next 2 states where he is. The race is going to get further muddled by 2 states that are not as hospitable to Mr. Buttigieg. But I'm going up on Sunday evening, and we'll spend the first 2 days of next week there. So I'm really looking forward to seeing the candidates in action.
I don't envy you. I had to do that 4 years ago when the Republicans fight it out. I go and watch it up close. When the Democrats do, nobody talks to me, so I stay home. I do look at these numbers, though, and I want to repeat them slowly. Boston Globe, Suffolk Post. Bernie Sanders has 25. Pete Buttigieg has 19. Joe Biden has 12. Elizabeth Warren has 11. Klobuchar has 5. Klobuchar has 6. Gabbard has 5. Yang has 2. Tom Steyer has 4. In the Emerson WHDH poll, Bernie Sanders has 31. Pete Buttigieg has 21. Elizabeth Warren has 12. Joe Biden has 12. Tulsi Gabbard has 5. Steve Yang has 5. Tom Steyer has 1. So that's a Sanders lead of 6 and a Sanders lead of 10. But I think what jumps out of that is that Joe Biden is going to finish at best 4th again, maybe 3rd, but it looks like 4th again. Is he out of money, Jake Sherman?
Well, I think it just becomes increasingly difficult to raise money. I don't know his current cash situation, but if you don't have a theory of the case for the candidacy, people are not going to keep cutting you checks, and I think that's going to be a problem. Now, if you talk to Joe Biden's people, what they say is if he wins South Carolina, if he places well in Nevada, he's very much alive. This is not a contest that's going to be decided in Iowa and New Hampshire, and that's fair enough. But a 4th place finish in Iowa and a 4th place finish in New Hampshire, regardless of if you served as vice president and a senator for many decades and have a career that a lot of people might envy, it doesn't. We're working in the here and now. We're not talking about a nostalgic view of Joe Biden. We're talking about Joe Biden in 2020 facing this field, not facing some other imagined field at some point in time. So you begin to wonder, if you're a Democrat, and Democrats are, this is not me talking, this is Democrats talking, you begin to wonder what the theory of the case is. And if you don't have a theory of the case, why give money to somebody who's not going to make it through?
Let's talk about Joe Biden.
And I wish to complain about this parrot what I purchased not half an hour ago from this very boutique.
Oh, yes, the Norwegian blue. What's wrong with it?
I'll tell you what's wrong with it. It's dead. That's what's wrong with it.
No, it's resting, look.
Look, my lad, I know a dead parrot when I see one, and I'm looking at one.
You know where
right now.
I'm going, Jake.
No, it's not dead.
Nobody wants to say it, but the parrot is dead. And I really do not know how you how anybody, not you, Jake Sherman of Politico, but how anybody pretends that the former vice president of the United States has horribly disappointed in the first state and is likely to do so in the second state.
He's not performed where his advisors thought he would have. I mean, there's no question about that. And I think a lot of Democrats that I talk to, elected Democrats, which are most of the people that I talk to, given I'm Washington-based and cover Congress, most of those Democrats recognize he is not where the center of gravity is in the party at the moment. He's not where the energy is in the party at the moment, and his argument is, well, I'll beat Donald Trump. Well, you have to beat other people first. I mean, you can't say, if you start running, you can't say, well, I can't run a mile, but I believe at some point I'll be able to run a marathon. That's not how this works. You need to be able to get support and get through the primary process in order to get to the general election. That's how this game works.
And you need to excite people, which you cannot do with lines like,
play the radio, make sure make sure you have the record player on at night, the phone.
He's just not connecting. Yesterday in New Hampshire, Joe Biden said this, cut number 13 again. He's in New Hampshire yesterday.
You know, we're 24 hours later, they're still trying to figure out what happened in Iowa. At this rate, New Hampshire will be the first in the country to get the vote. I am not going to sugarcoat it. We took a gut punch in Iowa. The whole process took a gut punch.
No, we took a gut punch. Joe Biden took a gut punch, and then he rounded on Bernie and Mayor Pete, cut 14.
But if Senator Sanders is a nominee for the party, every Democrat in America up and down the ballot, in blue states, red states, purple states, it's easy districts and competitive ones, every Democrat will have to carry the label Senator Sanders has chosen for himself. He calls him, and I don't criticize him, he calls himself a democratic socialist. Is he really saying that Obama-Biden administration was a failure? Pete, just say it out loud. I have great respect for Mayor Pete and the service of this nation. But I do believe it's a risk, to be just straight up with you, for this party to nominate someone who's never held an office higher than mayor of a town of 100,000 people in Indiana.
So, Jake Sherman, the gloves are off, but the punches are feeble, right?
Well, I don't know if the punches are feeble, but the gloves are definitely off. And listen, I think there's one thing that we need a couple things we need to take out of those comments. Number one, there were members of Congress in 2016 who did not run as Donald Trump Republicans, rather, and they won. So the idea that you have to carry somebody else's label might or might not be true. We don't know that to be true because it wasn't true in the past for Republicans in districts, many districts that did not vote for the president and did not like Donald Trump in 2016. That's number one. Number two, I do think, and I hear this all the time from Democrats, that they are worried that Joe Biden is the 2020 version of Hillary Clinton. And all of these issues, the Burisma issue, whether or not the son did anything illegal or bad, let's leave the fact aside for a second, the image of it, the brand of it is not good for Democrats and not good for Joe Biden. And I think that is always lingering here. I do. And Mayor Pete has done a ginger job of talking about it, saying he's from the Washington of yore and he's been in Washington a long time. And that is, to a lot of people that I've spoken to, code words for this is a not an issue that is really helpful for Joe Biden.
Now, let's talk about Mayor Pete. Bernie is who Bernie is, and Bernie makes a Bernie message. Pete started out running as a moderate, used to come on this show, go on Fox, talk to everyone, be the nice Midwestern guy. Then he went left. Media Matters gone on his case for going on the center-right shows, and he won't do it anymore. I don't think he can win from where he is. I don't think he's a lefty. He's pretending to be one. Does he have traction beyond his beyond that famous quote? He's every grandparent's idea of what a presidential candidate should look like.
I don't know the answer to that. I do think he's going to have trouble getting through South Carolina, where the black vote is extraordinarily important, and a state like Nevada, and a state like California, a state like Texas. These are states where minority populations are are very big, and I don't know that he can get through those states.
But I think Bernie can. Meanwhile, Gallup shows us, listen to this, more Americans believe that their lot is better off than a year ago economically than in the history of 40 years of Gallup polling. That's astonishing. Astonishing. Jake Sherman of Politico. Follow him on Twitter at Jake Sherman. Follow Politico at Politico. Follow me to the next segment on the Hugh Hewitt Show. Welcome back. I'm Hugh Hewitt, America. Playing Pete Buttigieg music. They're the hipsters in New Hampshire. To my friends in Manchester, Keene. You folks over in Nashua. All those nice young people. They're not the monkeys. They're the Buttigieg team. Buttigieg has come to town. And they're behind. They lost a little ground overnight in the continued counting in Iowa. As of this morning, Pete Buttigieg has 550 delegates. Mr. Sanders has 547. It's a dead heat. But Pete Buttigieg won. Doesn't matter. I've told you the two polls that have come out in New Hampshire. Now, here's the deal about the New Hampshire primary. It is a modified open primary. Democrats vote in Democratic primary, Republicans vote in Republican primary, but they have this thing called an undeclared voter. And there are a lot of them. And they can choose to vote wherever they want. They're not going to go over and vote for Donald Trump. There's no fun there. I want them to go vote for Bernie Sanders, like I did in Virginia. I voted by absentee in Virginia. I'm not going to be there on March 3rd, Super Tuesday. I want Bernie Sanders, clear choice. Put it in front of the American people. Socialism. That's the white suit, pantsuit crowd at the State of the Union the other night. Let's have it out. Donald Trump, Mr. Capitalism versus socialist Bernie Sanders. Let's just have it out. So if you are a undeclared voter in New Hampshire, remember, Pete Buttigieg might be the monkeys of 2020, but go with Bernie Sanders. You can trust him. 1-800-520-1234. What are you doing this weekend besides getting ready to vote in New Hampshire for Bernie Sanders? Go see the movie Created Equal. Clarence Thomas, in his own words. I spoke yesterday with Michael Pack, the director of Clarence Thomas, Created Equal. And it's a terrific film. It's about a terrific man. I've known Justice Thomas since 1984. When he and I served on the combined federal campaign committee together in Washington, D.C. I've known Jenny, his wife, a long time. He's an American hero. And the movie, Created Equal, Clarence Thomas, in his own words, needs to be seen not just by conservatives, but by everyone. Did a long interview with Justice Thomas about his book, My Grandfather's Son, when it came out, I believe, in 2007. That interview made me laugh and made me think the movie's going to make you angry, and it's going to make you laugh, and it's going to make you think and cry. For showtimes and tickets, go to justicethomasmovie.com, justicethomasmovie.com. Mike Bloomberg, remember, it's a Bernie, Buttigieg, Bloomberg race. That's it. Biden's done. Andrew Yang's done. Elizabeth Warren's done. They're all cooked. 3 people left. Just 3. Bernie, Buttigieg, and Bloomberg. Mike Bloomberg was in Rhode Island. 1-800-520-1234. I'll take calls afterward. Let's listen to Mike Bloomberg, cut number 15.
For honesty, for inclusion, for compassion, and for human decency. Okay. I have absolutely... Time out. Time out. Wait a second. Wait. Time out, folks. Number one, the answer to questions, I have no idea, and if you stop this, I will talk to you outside, okay? Thank you. Thank you. You know, thank you for making me feel like I was back in New York City. Well, thank you. I appreciate your
Mike Bloomberg's got a stop and frisk problem with the African American community. And so I see Bernie Sanders getting the nomination. I hope he gets the nomination. I voted for him. Clarity. Clarity before agreement. A choice, not an echo. Stay tuned. 1-800-520-1234. Are you voting for Bernie? We are playing Monkeys music this morning in honor of Pete Buttigieg's youth campaign in New Hampshire. Mayor Pete won barely, but he won. All right, a winner is a winner. It's like 1 point in the Super Bowl. A winner is a winner. He won in Iowa, and people should say that. He won. And so having won, we want to congratulate him and point to the fact that Bernie, however, is winning in all of the polls leading up to New Hampshire. And likely it's going to be a blowout win by 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 points. Meanwhile, the big economic story of the day remains the Wuhan coronavirus. I read from the Telegraph. The 2019 NCOV virus, or called Wuhan coronavirus, is more akin to the Spanish flu pandemic of 1918. It appears to be tracking the 1918 death rate at 2.3 PC, 20 times the normal winter flu, to the extent that we can believe any figures. That's from the Telegraph. That is the story but markets are shrugging it off. All right, so overnight, the markets just said, ho-hum. In China, the Hong Kong index was up 2.5%. In Japan, it was up 2.38%. The Wednesday results in America, the Dow was up 483 points, NASDAQ was up 40, the S&P was up 37. And early this morning, gold is back at $15.70. Gold up $100 from when I first started to tell you. Good time to enter. Still a good time to enter. Birch Gold Group is the best place to buy your gold. If you've got any concern about the coronavirus or the soaring national debt, you can join many of the world's wealthiest in diversifying into gold and silver. My friends at Birch Gold Group make it so easy to convert an eligible IRA or a 401k into a precious metal IRA. They give you security from a floundering U.S. dollar. All you have to do is call 1-800-434-GOLD. 1-800-434-GOLD. Request a free information kit. See if diversification works for you. Call Birch Gold and open your precious metals IRA now and during February for just this month. Birch Gold is celebrating February's extra day, the 29th. It's bonus day with a special bonus offer. For every $5,000 you put into that IRA, they will give you a free 1-ounce silver coin. Give that to your kids or grandkids. Teach them the benefits of diversification too. But you have to call and buy this month. Birch Gold Group has thousands of satisfied customers, countless 5-star reviews, A+ rating with the Better Business Bureau. 1-800-434-GOLD. To get your info kit, claim your eligibility for this special offer. 1-800-434-GOLD. Ed in Nevada. Good morning, Ed. What say you?
Well, the early voting starts Monday here, and some of the TV stations in the state have gone to the Democratic Party and said, well, are you ready for the caucuses here? And it wouldn't grant much of an interview, only a 5-minute interview. They literally shut the door in their face, and they asked about that shadow software company, and they said, well, we're not using them. But they're on record of paying them like $50,000 or more. So I don't see how it's going to come off here. And, of course, the Bernie people in the state are mad because they changed the debate rules that's sponsored by your buddies out at MSNBC and your guy John Ralston and his website. They said, well, that we can't. Well,
you got to let Bloomberg in. You got to let him in.
Coming in.
You got to. I mean, he's showing up in the polls. It's a Bernie, Buttigieg, Bloomberg race. That's what it is. Bernie, Buttigieg, Bloomberg. And there are three very distinctive Bs. Nobody else counts. Biden is over. Klobuchar is over. Warren's over. They're just done. So you've got three choices. I'm glad they're letting Bernie in. Ed, thank you for the call. Good morning in Nevada. Let me run down for you the last 3 days of poll. New Hampshire, Emerson, Sanders plus 15. New Hampshire, UMass Lowell, Sanders plus 1. New Hampshire, Boston Herald, Sanders plus 7. New Hampshire, Emerson poll, Sanders plus 15. UMass Lowell poll, Sanders plus 1. Boston Herald, Sanders plus 7. WHDH Emerson, Sanders plus 19. Boston Globe, Sanders plus 6. UMass Amherst, Sanders plus 5. Wednesday's poll. Boston Globe, Sanders plus 9. WHDH Emerson, Sanders plus 15. So you know who's going to win New Hampshire? Sanders. Now, I think that if you are an undeclared voter, you ought to vote for Bernie and give him a boost into New Hampshire because Bloomberg's buying it. And if you don't want Bloomberg to buy it, you got to shed Pete and go with Bernie. But if you don't mind being bought, Bloomberg is buying the Democratic nomination. And if you don't mind that, that's fine. Joe Biden at a CNN town hall. Cut number 19, calling Rush racist. Cut number 19.
Rush Limbaugh spent his entire time on the air dividing people, belittling people, talking about blacks in ways, African Americans in ways that, anyway, I do feel badly, and I mean this sincerely, that he's suffering from a terminal illness. So he has my empathy and sympathy no matter what his background is. But the idea that he is a State of the Union, receives a medal that is of the highest honor that can be given to a civilian, I find, quite frankly, driven more by trying to maintain your right-wing political credentials than it is anything else. I mean, if you read some of the things that Rush has said about people, their backgrounds, their ethnicity, how he speaks to them, I don't think he speaks, I don't think he understands the American code of decency and honor. I just really, but look, this is Donald Trump.
I have to say that's slanderous from Corn Pop. Remember Corn Pop? Remember Joe Biden and Corn Pop? Remember Joe Biden saying Barack Obama was clean? Talking about Indian accents at Kmart. Rush Limbaugh has zero racism in him, and to attribute to him is slander. That's why Joe Biden's fallen like a rock. He also lost his train of thought, which goes back to what Britt Hume said. The poor guy is the poor old guy, and he can't win. Bloomberg is hiding. I got nothing against him being tiny, but he's hiding. He's not taking any questions. He's hiding. Joe Biden more in the CNN New Hampshire town hall, cut number 20.
And so what we have to do is we have to make it clear to Vladimir Putin. By the way, Facebook said they're not going to take down ads even if they're true.
But, that's not what they said. They said they're not in the business. They shouldn't be in the business of censoring people. Facebook is a free speech model. Now, the government is the one that guarantees free speech. You haven't got a First Amendment issue unless the government involved. Facebook isn't government, so it's not a First Amendment issue. But there are free speech values that Facebook embraces. Democrats don't like them. They want to control speech. More Joe Biden. You won't believe this one at the CNN town hall, cut 21.
So if you have your own private insurance, you've negotiated with your company and you have a good policy and you like it, you get to keep it. If they cancel the policy, you can immediately buy into the what will become the Biden plan, and or you can
stop the Biden plan. This guy is a dead candidate walking. His campaign's over. There's no money. There's no energy. He's in 4th place in Iowa. He'll be lucky to be 3rd place in New Hampshire. Not going to make the South Carolina. Done. Bernie, Buttigieg, Bloomberg. Trish Regan on Fox Business walks through Pete Buttigieg's connection to the shadow software that blew up Iowa, cut number 22.
You want to talk messed up? Get this. Mayor Pete, the supposed winner of Iowa, his senior campaign advisor helped hire his own wife's company to count his own candidate's votes. Yeah. Conflict of interest much? I mean, it's almost like in Venezuela when Hugo Chavez owned the voting machines, for goodness sakes. Her company owns Shadow Inc. Shadow Inc. counted the votes. Her husband's candidate won. So let me just back up for a second here. This campaign advisor, take a look, Michael Haley, he's married to this woman, Tara McGowan. Now, Tara just happens to run the company that owns Shadow Inc. Shadow Inc. made and ran the app that created this entire Iowa debacle. And the conflict gets even worse. According to the Associated Press, Buttigieg's campaign gave $42,500 to Shadow Inc. Again, remember, Mayor Pete's advisor's wife runs the company. Now, this was all ahead of collecting the Iowa votes. Now, I just ask, what is wrong with these people? I mean, did no one at the DNC bother to ask Shadow, hey, have you been paid by any of the campaigns before using them? Are there any conflicts of interest, perhaps, that we should be aware of? Like, does your wife own the company? As in, do you have an ownership stake in these companies? The Buttigieg advisor is married to the woman who partly owns Shadow. This is so messed up. They're married, therefore, well, I guess he kind of, if she has any equity in the company, he kind of owns the company too. I mean, you cannot make this up.
You can make up that Shadow failed and that Iowa is stuck with Shadow. By the way, Iowa is stuck with Shadow. Did you know that? And so CBS Channel 8 Nevada reporting, what are they going to do? Cut 23.
The day after Iowa's failed caucus, Nevada State Democratic Party Chair William McCurdy released a statement which reads in part, "We will not be employing the same app or vendor used in the Iowa caucus." But campaign finance records reveal the Nevada State Democratic Party did pay Shadow Inc., which made the one used in Iowa. So when the caucus director agreed to a 5-minute interview Tuesday, we asked about it.
Was the initial plan to work with them and now you have to change? Yeah, we were working with that vendor and now we are not.
Wilkes told us her team was
screwed. Let me talk about happy stuff. Honor Bound coffee is in my hand. Honor Bound coffee is in my cup. My cup is, in fact, Honor Bound coffee if you're watching on HughHewitt.com or Town Hall TV. Honor Bound coffee, 100% of the profits go to support military families, beginning with the Semper Fi Fund. Go to Honor Bound Coffee, subscribe, never buy coffee in a supermarket again. The best coffee in America, 4 different brews, 4 different grinds, one great cause. Supporting America's military families, beginning with the Semper Fi Fund. Get your honorboundcoffee.com today and join those people who are with every single sip of coffee supporting the American military. Time as well for relieffactor.com. There's my blue bag. There's my packet of 4. First hour of every show. At this time, my coffee's a little lukewarm. If I put my 4 pills in, I carry in curcumin, resveratrol, and omega. That is exactly what you need in your diet to be healthy, wealthy, and moving. Maybe not wealthy. I don't think it does anything for your bottom line. Certainly not expensive. $19.95 is the 3-week starter pack. But it'll keep you moving. The weekend is almost upon us. Thursday starts the long weekend. For some of you, get the 4-day work week. Whatever you're doing this weekend, do it with less pain. Do it with more comfort. And if you're commuting, about to head out the door, relieffactor.com makes that easier too. Whether you're aging or exercising or simply driving, relieffactor.com. From Israel, Michael Oren joins us next. They got an election going on there. Let's see what the State of the Union, if anything, did there. We'll talk with Michael Oren next on the Hugh Hewitt Show. Welcome back, America. Hugh Hewitt in the ReliefFactor.com studio. Breaking news overnight from Jerusalem. 12 soldiers were wounded in the IDF, one seriously in a suspected terror car ramming in Jerusalem. Joined by Michael Oren, former Israeli ambassador to the United States, former deputy minister. Dr. Oren, all terror attacks are terrible. Is this one that really will register in people's consciousness?
For a cause and effect, I think, Hugh, the Trump plan and the Palestinians lash out. The fact is we actually had 2 terrorist attacks last night in Jerusalem. There was also a shooting attack, and the shooter was neutralized. And at the same time, last night, Israeli forces reportedly struck Iranian positions outside of Damascus, and Israeli forces struck at Hamas positions last night after Hamas fired rockets and mortar shells into Israel. So we were fighting on 3 fronts last night: north, east, and southwest. Amazing. And it's a normal day in the state of Israel. And no one's saying this is all because of the Trump plan. This is our neighborhood. It is about the toughest neighborhood you can find anywhere in the world.
What is a week after the unveiling of the peace plan, has the frozen nature of Israeli politics thawed in any significant way?
It has not. I mean, Benjamin Netanyahu had this big rollout with President Trump, tremendous press coverage. Then he went off to Russia to receive from Putin a young Israeli woman who had been allegedly caught with 9 grams of marijuana and sentenced to 7.5 years in prison there, basically held hostage there by the Russians. He came back with her. That was hugely popular. And then he went off to meet with the leader of Sudan, which was truly extraordinary because all those Iranian rockets that are fired out of Gaza get into Gaza via Sudan. So these were immense achievements for the prime minister. His popularity went up exactly 1 seat in Knesset, and that is probably ephemeral.
And given that, is there movement on the fringes?
Not much. I think that the Israeli more extreme right, after initially celebrating the Trump plan, woke up after a night of binging on it and found that they had a hangover. What was the hangover? It was the Palestinian state. And the annexation of the Jordan Valley and of certain settlement blocks was supposed to be sort of a sweetener for that bitter Palestinian state pill. But when the annexation didn't come about, increasing numbers of people on the right are now rejecting the Trump plan as providing a Palestinian state. So you almost can't make this stuff up. But the major thing, Hugh, is when you don't look at the parties, look at the blocks. And right now, the right-hand bloc and the center-left bloc are exactly deadlocked.
So if we have another deadlock, Netanyahu remains as prime minister and you have a 4th election?
Well, Avigdor Lieberman, who's supposedly the kingmaker here, has repeatedly vowed that there will not be a 4th election. How that's going to happen, we don't know. He has been intimating that he's willing to form a coalition with the Israeli left, which he has never done before. It's possible, but I will not say with any certainty that we will not go to a 4th round of election. Now,
Lieberman has also said in the past he will never join a government with the Arab list, right?
Well, it won't be with the Arab list, but it will be their implicit support outside of the list. Because without the Arab implicit support, the Benny Gantz bloc can't come anywhere near the right-wing bloc. So Avigdor Lieberman, he may not have Arabs sitting in his coalition, but they'll be sitting outside the coalition and enabling the coalition to actually govern.
Does that fool anyone?
No.
Okay, so I
think at this point, everyone just wants a government.
But he's flip-flopping. Lieberman is flip-flopping from the last time when he said he would not be in a government supported by the Arab list, and this time he's saying or intimating that he would.
Well, I imagine you're sitting down, Hugh, but there are politicians who flip-flop.
Well, I know, but I just, Israeli politics, you have been very, very patient, and we'll probably have that. When is the election date, by the way?
March 2nd.
Okay, so we're at least within a month of this. Has it already gone into overdrive?
No, actually extremely low-key, and people have commented about that. No big posters around. I think everyone is almost embarrassed by the fact that we have to go for this 3rd round of elections. But we're expecting a high voter turnout. And you'd think that the electorate here would be tired and say, we've discredited the system. In fact, they're expecting a higher voter turnout for the 3rd round.
Those people who have not voted before, they're very interesting. They were the key to Brexit. They were the key to Trump. They may be the key to Trump's reelection. Which way does the new voter break in Israel?
Well, we have a very high percentage of voters in this country. Sometimes as high as twice as high as what you can get in the United States. Close to 80% we can go up to. So there are not many new voters. What you do have in Israel, to the nth degree, are young voters. We have the largest youth population under 30 of any industrialized country in the world by far. We have basically 3 times the growth rate of certain European countries. And these young people, they don't remember Oslo. They don't remember handshakes. They are right-wing, and they are anti-extreme religious. And that is a huge constituency. That's what Avigdor Lieberman's going for. Benny Gantz is going for. Bibi so far not going for that because he wants to be aligned with the religious.
Michael, always a pleasure. Dr. Dr. Michael Oren on Twitter. Follow him especially over the next months as we head to an election with our closest ally in the Middle East. We absolutely need Israel to get a government finally. Dr. Michael Oren, Dr. Michael Oren. Follow me to hour number 2, America. It's the Hugh Hewitt Show. Morning, Glory America. Bonjour. Hi, Canada. Hugh Hewitt in the ReliefFactor.com studio. Joined this morning by General David Deptula, retired United States Air Force. Good morning, General. How are you? Hey, General, you with me?
Yes, sir.
Okay. I want to begin by asking you, I don't know if you saw the State of the Union, but I was certainly impressed by General McGee of the Tuskegee Airmen. We've got a 100-year-old fighter pilot. Looked like he could get behind the cockpit, get into the cockpit and fly again.
Yeah, he was and is an extraordinary individual, and it was really heartwarming to see the president recognize such a genuine American hero.
At the same time that there's a movie out, General, called Last Full Measure about a fellow by the name of William Pitsenbarger, the only one of 3 enlisted airmen ever to receive the Medal of Honor for bravery as a parajumper in a 1966 battle in Vietnam. I was wholly unaware of this story, very impressed with the movie, which starred, among others, Samuel L. Jackson, and they had Peter Fonda, and they've got William Hurt in it and Ed Harris. Were you aware of the Pitsenbarger story?
Yes, his story is one that is familiar to those in the Air Force. I have to admit my schedule has prevented me from seeing the movie so far, but it's on the top of my to-do list, so I'm glad to hear that you took away a very positive impression from that whole story.
I did. It's a credit to the Air Force that it got made. You could tell they had some help in getting it made. Now let's get to the story of the morning, which comes from Foreign Policy magazine, and it suggests that the United States Department of Defense is about a policy, a plan to retire hundreds of the Air Force's aging fighter jets and bombing aircrafts over the next 5 years. This comes from Laura Seligman in Foreign Policy magazine. The Pentagon will propose retiring many of its older aircraft as new capabilities come online. What do you think about this, General Deptula? And do we need these older F-15s, F-16s, and 17 of the roughly 60 non-nuclear B-1s, along with 21 of the RQ-4 Global Hawk drones slated for the boneyard?
Well, Hugh, you put your finger on an extraordinarily important issue, and here's the bottom line up front. The bottom line up front is that the United States Air Force and now Space Force, both under the Department of the Air Force, are and have been given way too much more mission than the resources they've been allocated to accomplish it. So the Air Force has been put in this extraordinarily difficult position of, okay, they have to make a choice. We can continue to sustain our geriatric forces. Remember, we've got bombers. The majority of our bomber force, the B-52, the youngest B-52 is 56 years old. We have tankers that are over 50 years old. We have trainers that are over 50 years old. Our fighters are over 30 years old. So the point is, we've got an increasingly aging force that costs a lot of money to maintain as parts age out and the systems simply wear out. That's what's happened with the B-1, Hugh. The reason the Air Force is going to put up and recommend retiring 17 of the 61 B-1s is they're simply worn out and they're becoming dangerous to fly. Now, at the same time, we need to prepare for a future and gain the capabilities necessary to be able to achieve deterrence and deter potential adversaries from winning in the future, and that requires investment. So the Air Force is in this quandary. They don't have enough money to both maintain the current forces and invest in the future, so they're taking some prudent measures in the context of, okay, how do we get rid of or retire some of the most costly aging force to free up funds that we can invest in a necessary future?
Now, this seems to me, to borrow an analogy from history, when the Japanese admirals were trying to change out their force structure in the Battle of Midway, they got caught. They got caught trying to get their fighters up and bring their bombers down, and they got destroyed. You're trying to retire a bunch of things while you bring on the new F-15EX, the Lockheed F-35, and the Northrop Grumman B-21. Is there a plan that you're comfortable with, General Deptula, that will make that switch in time efficiently?
It's going to be a challenge, Hugh. It's going to be an extraordinary challenge. And the fact of the matter is, the United States Air Force needs greater resources to accomplish the missions that it's been given. And the fact of the matter is that we have maintained a relative period of peace, understanding the deployments and the challenges that we've had fighting terrorism, but we have not been in a major regional conflict since Desert Storm in 1991. And until the Congress realizes that the Department of Defense and the Air Force in particular needs greater resources to be able to achieve the kind of deterrent effect that will prevent war in the future, I'm afraid that when we do get into the next big dust-up, it's going to look ugly.
Now, General Deptula, at the risk of getting my friend Secretary Pompeo and Senator Cotton mad at me, Army men true and strong, I know the Navy needs a bigger top line. I've been persuaded and arguing that for a long time. I know these B-21s are absolutely essential to the triad. It does seem to me that big Army is where the belt needs to be tightened, because we're just not going to do ground wars for a long time. We're going to do South China Sea great power competition. So if you're recasting that pie, which has traditionally been a third, isn't it about time they got to go to 35, 35, 30, if not more, with the 30 being the Army?
Well, Hugh, those numbers are based on mythology. One of the things I believe I mentioned briefly last time we talked is in the United States Air Force budget is $40 billion of what's called pass-through. That's money to fund space intelligence accounts that the Air Force has no control over. So if you take that $40 billion out, the Air Force isn't getting 1/3, it's getting 1/5 of the current budget. So we need to fix that. But back to your point, look, we need all the services. So we need a strong Army, Navy, Air Force, and Marine Corps. However, you put your finger on something. You can reconstitute soldiers on the ground relatively quickly. So a large number of the personnel in the United States Army can be put in the Guard and the reserves, which can save an enormous amount of money, which we can then use to recapitalize our geriatric Air Force. So your perspective is an accurate one.
Is anyone doing that work? Is Secretary Esper doing that work? And when you say it's 1/5, not 1/3, where does a civilian like me, who would actually like to see the reality of where the top lines are and where they are going, and the argument about over where they need to be, where does someone like me go?
Well, you go to the service posture hearings that are going to come up in the posture statements, and you have to read all of them. You're going to get each of the services' flavor, and then the Secretary of Defense's overarching testimony. These issues tend to get very complex real quick. However, the broad brush perspectives are included in those posture statements. And then folks need to be reading the documents and the perspectives that are out there on some of these key issues. I mean, that's a function of what I do in the context of Mitchell Institute and getting some of these issues out into the public. I'm going to have one coming out here pretty shortly that addresses what we need to do to set up the Space Force for success. I mean, the president's created this new Space Force, but it only consists of airmen that are coming out of the Air Force, no additional resources, and no consolidation of the 60 different organizations in the government that have a hand in space. These are things that need to be fixed if, in fact, we're going to succeed in space. So there's another one that we need to pay attention to.
So last question. Does Secretary Esper lay down this budget allocation when all is said and done? Congress makes it, but they have to operate off of someone's recommendation, or is it the OMB?
It's a combination of both. OMB tends to set large macro-scale objectives in terms of a defense obligational authority, and then Secretary Esper comes up with a department-wide plan that each one of the services fights hard to obtain. So it is a difficult process, but here's the bottom line, Hugh. We formed this nation to provide for the common defense and promote the general welfare, not the other way around.
General David Deptula, retired United States Air Force, head of the Mitchell Institute for Aerospace Studies. Keep coming back. It's an important conversation. We always do it every week, whether or not people want to hear about it. We got to keep it. It is breaking news always, because we are always away from being a broken country if we're not up to speed on the battlements. Thank you, General. I'll be right back. America, it's the Hugh Hewitt Show. Welcome back, America. It's Hugh Hewitt. On Thursday morning, the president addresses the nation at noon Eastern today on his acquittal. The major economic story of the day brought to you by Andrew and Todd.com. Andrew Del Rey, Todd Avakian with Sierra Pacific Mortgage. They lend you money. It's a great time to borrow money from your home because the 10-year interest rate, the 10-year bond, is at 1.65%, which means any money you borrow to buy a house or refinance a house will be in the 3% range. If you need to consolidate debt, you got to pay for college, you got to do it. You want to buy a house for your son or daughter, help them get in. They've saved a little, but not enough. You're going to get them some down payment. You're going to become a co-borrowing, non-occupying owner. That's where you call Andrew Del Rey and Todd Avakian. Best thing to do is go online to andrewandtodd.com. Better yet, call them at 888-888-1172. The big story is the coronavirus. I read from the New York Times live updates. China's death toll soars as Wuhan plans roundup of infected people. All right, so that's they're going to just gather them all up. The death toll rose to 563 as the lockdown enters its third week. The infection rate continues to soar. The cordon that is first imposed around a city of 11 million is now expanded to encircle 50 million people in the entire province of Hubei. The lockdown is unprecedented in its scale, and its effects have questioned. Its effectiveness has been questioned by everyone. The fatality rate in Wuhan is 4.1%. 2.8% in Hubei, the province, compared to 0.17% elsewhere in mainland China and 0 in the rest of the world. It's not getting out yet. But the incubation period and the period of asymptomatic contagiousness remains controversial and unknown. There are 28,018 cases confirmed in China. That number has increased 35% in just a few days. What do the markets think about this? Not much. In Japan overnight, the market went up 2.38%. The Hong Kong market, which is right across from the mainland, went up 2.5%. They really do believe, A, that there is a cure, and I've seen reports from Thailand and others of the antiviral combination that is effective, and that it is contained, and you're screwed if you're in Wuhan. But there are other interesting stories. You just got to watch the market and find yourself where you are. But I do believe that the rising 10-year up to 1.65 shows panic is not in the offing. When the 10-year goes down, you've got panic. Gold at $15.67 an ounce. That's not panic. Light crude, $51.24. That's up a little bit. They're beginning to think this is a China problem and nowhere else problem. China's got a problem, but the rest of the world doesn't. You, if you want to buy property, have an opportunity. AndrewandTodd.com. 888-888-1172. The big news is, of course, New Hampshire, and then New Hampshire, where Bernie Sanders leads every poll, every poll, by at least a couple and sometimes double digits. And in second place, Pete Buttigieg, always. Third place contested between Elizabeth Warren and Joe Biden. But I think what you really want to know is the average. Real Clear Politics political average. Sanders 25.6, Biden 17.1, Buttigieg 15.0. I don't believe that is accurate because the most recent polls, which have come out since Pete Buttigieg won New Hampshire, show Buttigieg at 19 and 21 respectively, behind Sanders at 25 and 31. Joe Biden falling like a rock. And I'm thinking in New Hampshire they have the undeclared voter, and there are a lot of them. They get to vote in either primary, Republican or Democrat. They're going to do what I did. They're going to vote for Bernie because he's more interesting. And honestly, Pete Buttigieg can't win. You know that, and I know that. Bernie might. If you want a choice, not an echo, you vote for Bernie Sanders. Pete gave up the opportunity to go woo the moderates. I'm sorry that he did, but he did. Decided to go left with the rest of them. More coming up after the break on the Hugh Hewitt Show. Welcome back, America. Pete Buttigieg music as they invade New Hampshire with the big momentum sort of out of Iowa, where they won sort of. In fact, Bernie Sanders is going to get 11 delegates. Pete Buttigieg is going to get 11 delegates. Elizabeth Warren is going to get 5 delegates, and a technical victory to Pete Buttigieg. But it's that 11-11-5. The Real Clear Politics average of polls shows Pete Buttigieg closing on Bernie, but the last 5 individual polls, including the 2 this morning, Boston Globe, Suffolk, has Bernie Sanders ahead by 6 over Buttigieg. And the WHDH Emerson poll has Bernie Sanders over 10 over Buttigieg. What will the undeclared voter do? They can vote in either primary up there. Republicans have to vote Republican, Democrat, but the vast number of undeclareds in the Granite State can go either way. Joining me to talk about that is Eliana Y. Johnson. She is the editor-in-chief of the Washington Free Beacon. Follow her on Twitter at Eliana Y. Johnson. Follow the Free Beacon at Free Beacon. And her prediction, heard her first, what's going to happen on Tuesday in New Hampshire, Eliana?
Well, Hugh, it does look like Bernie Sanders is going into the race in a very strong position, and I think, but it appears to me to still be a wide open race on the Democratic side. Buttigieg obviously performed well. Elizabeth Warren still in it. You know, she performed pretty well in Iowa. The storyline that I think is very clear is that the Iowa results were really a catastrophe for Joe Biden, and he is flailing in New Hampshire as well. And all along, he was looking to South Carolina as his bulwark. And what's surprising, I think, is that he now is beginning to falter in South Carolina, where the African-American voters there had been very loyal to him. And I think Biden's performance there is really something to watch. And he and his campaign really do appear to be in a difficult position. And then the question is, where do those establishment votes go?
It does seem to, early voting is underway. I think I've told you, Eliana, I already voted in Virginia. I voted for Bernie because it's an open primary, and I want the clearest choice possible. I didn't vote strategically. I think Elizabeth Warren's easier to beat. But Bernie is the real deal socialist, and I'd like to run against a real deal socialist and have that conversation in America. But they're voting in California. They're voting in Super Tuesday states all over the place. But in New Hampshire, where do you think these free voters go? They have free-range chicken voters up there, and they do this every 4 years. They put John McCain. They gave him the nomination in 2008 when Mitt Romney would otherwise have won, but for New Hampshire. They decided George H.W. Bush over Bob Dole back in the day in 1992. They decide these things. They didn't decide it for the Democrats when they voted for Hillary in 2008. What are they going to do this time?
You know, it's difficult to say, and I think we saw in Iowa that the futility of trying to predict these things, in that Buttigieg seemed to outperform the polls, but Sanders does seem to appear to be going in to New Hampshire in a strong position. And Trump, of course, performed very well in New Hampshire in 2016. And Bernie is a Trump-like candidate. He does seem to be the sort of candidate that appeals to New Hampshire voters, and that he's outside of the typical party structure, and that does seem to be what voters want right now.
Eliana Y. Johnson of Free Beacon, there's an extraordinary stat that came up yesterday. Josh Jordan put it up. Gallup poll, 59% of Americans say they are better off financially than they were a year ago. That is the highest level in the history of Gallup polling. Gallup has never recorded 59% in over 40 years. Even during the dot-com boom, it was 58%. What do you extrapolate from that number?
Well, it's a number that I think the president should be talking about on the campaign trail, and it's something that will make him, I think, difficult to beat. I think this week has been one of the best weeks for the president in his presidency. We've seen the Gallup poll numbers where he has a 49% approval rating, 50% disapproval, some of the strongest numbers of his presidency, acquitted, of course, in the impeachment trial. But it's been a very good week for him. His State of the Union speech, I thought, was very effective. And he's had trouble, I think, in speeches and on the campaign trail generally, pounding home an effective message. And if he can, on the campaign trail, talk about the economy and pound home that statistic, he will be difficult to beat.
If he stays on message. I don't know what he's going to do at noon today. If I were him, I would not mention Mitt Romney and just leave it being Mitt, but I don't know that he can. I do believe that it's a formidable problem for Democrats and one that might lead them to Bernie, because if you're up against this kind of an economy, you've got to run on inequality. I don't know what else you run on. You certainly don't run on the Green New Deal, do you?
Right. I mean, I think somebody like Pete Buttigieg, they want to run on his character and temperament. They have other options, but running on the economy, I think, would be difficult for Democrats because the statistics are difficult to argue with.
All right, back to Pete Buttigieg. I've been having some fun by playing Monkees music, which is my demo and your father's demo, and you probably don't even know who the Monkees are. But the fact is they were the funny pretend band, right? They just invented the Monkees to make a TV series out of them, and it worked, and they had a few hits, and then they went away. Peter Stork, some of them very talented people, but they were a pretend band. I kind of look at the Buttigieg campaign and say they're the Monkees campaign. It's a pretend campaign, that it's not real. Is it real?
I do think it's real. Buttigieg, I think, is a real talent, but I also think there's really something to the Warren-Klobuchar critique in that he really only had experience in sort of small ball politics at the very local level, and it does seem incredibly improbable that he would end up with the nomination. But look, crazier things have happened. The Republicans nominated somebody with no political experience. So it is a real campaign. It is happening, and we've seen crazier things happen, 4 years ago. The headline in the Manchester Union Leader. Buttigieg says, quote, absolutely he can win New Hampshire. It begins former South Bend Mayor Buttigieg said he can absolutely win the first in the nation primary, while admitting it will be more difficult than his breakthrough showing in the Iowa caucus. He's 38 years old. He's trying to persuade people that a city of 100,000 is a sufficient amount of gravitas. When it comes down to it, Eliana, I always thought generational change is a great primary appeal. That they have won with generational change with Barack Obama, who didn't have much experience until he got to the Senate. They won with John F. Kennedy, who only had a couple of years in the House and a year in the Senate, but they were well-known figures. Do you really think this can be sustained? I do. They won with Bill Clinton, which I think is an apt comparison, in that he wasn't really a well-known figure at the time that he ran. But it's a challenge, and I do think Trump is a good comparison in that he had no political experience. The difference is that Trump was incredibly well known to everybody, and it was really his name recognition that helped him clobber the other 16 Republican primary opponents. Buttigieg's challenge is that he both doesn't have the political experience and doesn't have the name recognition. And that brings us to the third B: Bernie, Buttigieg, and Bloomberg. The mayor, you cannot, driving to the studio in California early this morning, Bloomberg ads. They are all over. I don't know if he's bought this station. I don't know if he's buying Christian radio. I don't know what I think he can buy everything. Basically every point in TV and radio is available for Mike Bloomberg. Is it working, Eliana Johnson? I think it's a little bit too early to say, but I do think it's working in the sense that Bloomberg has put himself on the map. He isn't a Howard Schultz where he's been a flash in the pan and disappeared. And the question is, if Buttigieg falters, if Biden falters, do those votes go to Bloomberg? I think it's certainly a possibility. He is a factor in this race right now. What's your impression of Mike Bloomberg? He seems to me to be a capable manager who's incredibly liberal on social issues, and has sort of defined his brand around that in terms of his policies on Second Amendment and on the soda ban. Those to me seem to be what he's tried to define himself around on the national scene.
My MSNBC pal Joy Reid used to tell me Mike Bloomberg will never escape stop and frisk. Never, ever escape stop and frisk. Do you agree with that?
I think it is too early to say, because I think that there are a lot of things that Democrats would forgive in an effort to beat Trump. And I think we're seeing that with Mitt Romney right now, in that Democrats are happy to lavish praise on anybody who opposes the president.
Yeah, but when it comes down to winning that critical African-American primary vote in South Carolina, in Illinois, in California, it matters a lot. Do they know about stop and frisk? And if they do, will they forgive?
Well, he may not win South Carolina. That's not the Bloomberg strategy. His strategy is to be the default at the end of everything. And the question is, African American voters in a race between Trump and Bloomberg, will they come out and vote for Bloomberg? And I don't know the answer to that question.
My guess is not. My guess is that Donald Trump's going to win more African American votes than anyone has any idea of right now. That's my read of the State of the Union, my read of his Super Bowl ad. I want to close by asking you about the political impact of that speech, and of course the crescendo at the end with Nancy Pelosi ripping it up. Did it help the president significantly? Not at all, or did it hurt him?
I do think it helped the president. State of the Union speeches, I think, had become sort of a relic. And reporting and covering the White House, you'd sort of hear reporters say to themselves, why do we do these things? What are the point of these things? These things are boring. And I think Trump, despite the criticism that this was a campaign speech, and so on, he made the speech relevant by making it political. And he effectively used his penchant for theatricality to drive home important political points to him.
He is a TV man, and boy, does he know TV. Eliana Y. Johnson on Twitter, editor of the Free Beacon, thank you. Time to remind all of you, Honor Bound Coffee, that's what I drink every morning. I'm holding it in my hand if you're watching on Univision or on Town Hall TV. Honor Bound Coffee, go. Pick one of the 4 brands, one of the 4 grinds, and support America's military families. 100% of the profits of this wonderful coffee go to support them. Don't forget, I already took my relief factor this morning. $19.95 is your starter pack. Don't leave home. Turn around. Go back. Get it. It's Thursday. It's the worst commuting day of the week. Everybody goes to work on Thursday because a lot of people are skipping out on Friday. It's the worst day of the week to be in the car if you've got a long drive, whether you're up in Seattle and you're driving all the way down to the city. Remember, when you're in Atlanta and you're stuck in the middle, wherever you are in this country, Orlando, Miami, wherever you are, you're listening to Hugh Hewitt Show. You should put some relief factor in your car, by the way, which is what I do. In the event that I do forget, I don't often forget. I keep it in my studio. You ought to keep it close at hand. $19.95. Get started. I carry in curcumin, resveratrol, and the omega that all of you ought to take. Jim Tallent's heard a lot of State of Unions. We'll talk with the former senator of Missouri about how he graded this week's when we return to the Hugh Hewitt Show. Welcome back, America. It's Hugh Hewitt on Thursday morning. It is New Hampshire week. Pete Buttigieg is in second place. Bernie Sanders extending his lead. No one else is close in New Hampshire. And I'm playing Pete Buttigieg Monkeys movie because it reminds me of the Monkey series of my youth. These kids from South Bend showing up in New Hampshire trying to persuade people that they can be president. Jim Talent joins me, former senator in Missouri. First, Jim, you have watched a lot of State of the Union addresses as of I. How'd you rate President Trump's?
Well, I thought it was great. I mean, first of all, I really liked the optimistic tone. I loved pulling in all those different heroic figures from different parts of America, and I like the fact that he's focusing on all his accomplishments. I'm not going to take the whole interview talking about it, but I'll tell you, in the field of foreign policy, Trump has really achieved great progress against the Chinese, in the Middle East. I mean, I could go down a list. So I like the speech. That said, these speeches have gotten too long. I mean, this goes back to Clinton. Personally, I'd prefer that they be shorter, but I thought it was a great speech.
35 million Americans. He got a clear shot at 35 million Americans. There's a new movie out I wanted to ask you about before I forget, called Created Equal, Clarence Thomas in his own words. It's made by Michael Pack. I interviewed Michael yesterday. I know you have known the justice for a long time. I know that his big Sherpa was a Missouri senator, as you were a Missouri senator. Do you think Clarence is a folk hero on the right and still despised on the left? Does a movie like Clarence Thomas Created Equal make a difference?
I hope so, because, apart from the politics or the jurisprudential questions, and everybody, of course, is free to agree or disagree with his jurisprudence, I think he was, just as a matter of personal justice, I think he was wrong terribly in that confirmation hearing, and I hope that this sort of thing clears it up in the minds of fair-minded people. We all have a right to have our personal records judged in a fair way, regardless of what people think of us as public officials.
And the movie features Thomas talking about himself, and it's a journey that begins in a crushing amount of poverty in the segregated South. He has a spiritual journey. He goes from radical to observant Catholic. It's filled an anger and rage youth. He's now a happy, jovial man. I just think Clarence Thomas is an American inspiration.
I do too. And I just think the politics behind his confirmation, unfortunately, will keep a lot of people from seeing him that way. But maybe this documentary will help.
Created Equal.
Though, when you do the right thing, you're going to make enemies.
Now,
and,
let me turn to
I'm sure that's how he sees it, you.
I hope so. Go see Created Equal, America. I want to turn to this Gallup poll. 59% of Americans say they are better off financially than they were a year ago. That's the highest number in the history of Gallup polling for over 40 years, Jim Talent. What's that tell you about re-election for Donald Trump?
Well, I think the president's in a very strong position, both for that reason and also because now we're moving into a cycle where we're going to compare him to somebody else and what they're likely to do. And I think he's going to come off well in that comparison. I think there's a lot of people who still have doubts about Trump. And, you got to understand, and just think about how you vote. There are sometimes you cast an enthusiastic vote, and sometimes you cast a vote where you go, well, I have some doubts, but I'm going to vote this way. Well, they count the same, right? And I kind of think the soft voters at the end of the day are going to say, I don't like Trump's style, but I like what he's produced, and I don't want to risk losing it all with Sanders or Warren or Buttigieg or whoever it is.
I agree with you. They're going to say the Twitters bother me, but I also like having a job, and I like my kids having a job. I like everyone having a job. Talk to me a little bit about Pete Buttigieg. I've been playing Monkeys music, which is my generation, a generation ahead of yours, just because he reminds me of the Monkeys. He's a fun kid, and at 35, he's not a kid. He served his country. He's a military veteran. I honor his service, but it's an implausible argument, and he stopped going on Fox. He stopped coming on this show because the left was giving him a hard time. He's not an authentic lefty. He's a center-left guy, but I just don't think he's going to carry this off. I think it's Bernie's race. What do you think?
I tend to agree with you. Bernie has something that's very important in a primary. He has a large, dedicated base of support, which helps to guarantee that he's in this thing for the long haul, right? And the person I would watch on the other side, maybe I'm wrong. I mean, I'm not a Democrat. Get Democrats on and talk to them, is Bloomberg because of his money, and because his money has, to this point, been lifting him up some in the polls. I mean, he's got some momentum.
But, stop and frisk. Joy Reid used to tell me when I did Joy's show in the old days that they will never, and in the Meet the Press green room, he will never be forgiven for stop and frisk, ever.
Well, listen, there are negatives to all of them, but remember, what we're talking about here is a race. If we get 3 or 4 people who last in this, and they each have some percentage of the vote, it's very difficult to figure out what's going to happen. Bloomberg can hang in because of his money. Bernie can hang in because of his base. And I think Biden can hang in if he wants to because of the name ID in the background. And who knows how long Warren is going to stay. So I think it's very early to predict this, but I think Trump's in good position no matter what.
Yeah, I really don't see Biden surviving a month, but we'll keep talking every week. Jim Talent on Twitter. Follow him at Jim Talent. Chuck Todd is ahead America. We'll ask him who won, who lost. Joe Biden lost, according to Chuck, and he and I agree it's over for Joe. But maybe he sees a comeback trail. What's he think about Pete Buttigieg? We'll find out. Don't go anywhere, America. It's the Hugh Hewitt Show. Morning glory, America. It's Hugh Hewitt, little Pete Buttigieg music. It reminds me, if you're my age, of the Monkeys campaign. Honestly, Pete and his gang coming to New Hampshire in second place to Bernie, according to the most recent polls, down by 8 in one and 10 in another. But he's in second place and rising. He won New Hampshire. He got 11 delegates. Bernie got 11 delegates. Warren got 5. Joe Biden has got 0. And along with the coronavirus, it's the only story. Chuck Todd joins me. He's the host of Meet the Press, senior political director of NBC News. Chuck, what's going on in Iowa and New Hampshire?
I kind of like the monkeys metaphor. They're sort of happy-go-lucky kids. That,
yep.
They're gonna. And you're like, oh look, and you don't take them seriously at first, and then you sit there and say, well, how about that? That tune's kind of catchy, and they're better than you think they are, and all that stuff.
They were put together by accident. No one took them seriously, and they had a huge hit. A huge hit.
No, it's true, and it is one of those things. You're like, the monkeys are definitely better remembered than they should have been.
And they're fun. And Pete Buttigieg tries to be fun. Yeah. So Bernie is at Bernie's latest poll, according, we got 2 out this morning, 25% in the Boston Globe poll, Buttigieg 19, Biden 12, Warren 11. In the Emerson WHDH poll, Sanders 31, Buttigieg 21. Warren 12, Biden 12, Klobuchar 11. What do those numbers tell you, if anything?
Well, it tells you that you're starting to see New Hampshire act like it has in the past. It is hearing a little bit from Iowa, and you are seeing that the new guy, the new moderate, is getting a little look-see. This idea that Iowa doesn't pay attention to, or New Hampshire never pays attention to Iowa, is just simply not true. But the biggest thing I've taken away that I think hasn't gotten enough attention in Iowa is that Sanders had a harder ceiling than I thought he had. I mean, if you would have told me the entrance poll would have shown that more people supported Clinton from the 16 caucuses than Sanders from the 16 caucuses, I'd have said, well, wow, there's no way Bernie can win. Now, Bernie, it looks like he's in a virtual tie with Buttigieg. But when you think about what he started with, right, 70,000 people already ID'd, right, if you think about it from the previous, 80,000 already in previous, and he couldn't get a majority. We know how popular Clinton's become in the party. And he couldn't basically dominate the 2016 caucus electorate. I have to say, I just think that Sanders has a lower ceiling, and I don't expect him to break 30 in New Hampshire despite that poll. I don't know if he does. And if he doesn't, and he could still win New Hampshire, but I think he's going to win it with a lower number because it is proving that I think he's got a harder ceiling. And it's the moderate wing in the party, whatever you want to call it, moderate, pragmatist, centrist, everybody's got a different name for it. The non-socialist wing, how about that? Is bigger than the progressive socialist wing of the party.
That's a great way to put the non-socialist wing.
Yeah, okay, it is bigger. And the question is, how quick can it coalesce soon enough? Now, I'm old enough to remember what happened 4 years ago. The non-Trump wing at one point was bigger than the Trump wing.
Yep.
But it never coalesced. And by the time it coalesced, Trump had grown beyond his own wing, and he had grown to at least the majority of the party. That's what Sanders would have to do. What I'm sitting here saying right now is I'm more skeptical today that he could do it. I was not a skeptic a week ago. I thought that's where we were potentially one of the more likelier scenarios. I'm bullish on Sanders' chances right now.
The Trump 4 years ago knocked down the pins more quickly. And the one pin that Bernie's not going to be able to knock down is Mike Bloomberg. I also have to give you, I think this is why there's a ceiling, Chuck. This is a stunning statistic. Gallup released this yesterday. 59% of Americans say they are better off financially than they were a year ago. That's the highest level in the history of Gallup polling. 59% say they're better off than they were a year ago.
And here's this. This is why the Democrats can't go as far. If Bernie's the nominee, it allows the economy to become an issue. Look, the economy hasn't been an issue in presidential politics, I would argue, now in at least 4 elections. We sit here and talk about how important it is, and yet we know the economy hasn't been the bigger voting issue. It's sort of a larger cultural issue, right? We know that when you start to look backwards, at the time we thought certain economic issues played, but I think when you start to look backwards, you realize the economy doesn't play nearly the same role as it did when we were younger, Hugh. And so, but if Bernie's the Democratic nominee, I think the economy does become a front and center issue, and I don't think the Democrats can win a good economic argument right now. Yes, they've got the inequality issue and healthcare and things like that, but I don't think they can win a basic, are you better off now than you were before? They need a nominee that frankly has a different conversation with Trump.
No.
And I think Bernie almost forces an economic message because of his views of how to reshape the economy. Warren probably to a lesser degree, although I don't think Warren's going anywhere. You finished third in a neighboring state. I don't know how you keep going.
I don't know where the money comes from. I think you were right. Biden's money's going to be gone by South Carolina as well.
He doesn't have it.
Yeah.
It already is gone. I mean, he spent it all in Iowa.
So
he's not even been able to add six figures of ad time into New Hampshire, Hugh.
Yeah. When I sat around the table on Meet the Press many months ago, I said Pete Buttigieg is the candidate of generational change. I worry about that because Democrats win with Kennedy and with Obama and with Clinton. But there's a plausibility threshold that those three had that he doesn't have. How does he get over it? The monkey's threshold.
I don't know, and I'm with you, and I don't know what it is. It's in some ways, I feel sorry for Pete because I know exactly what you mean, and yet I can't tell him what that is. Right? It's one of these things. We'll know it when we see it, but we can't fully put our arms around like what it takes. I don't know if it's simply he's lost weight and looks thinner and younger. I've noticed he lost weight over the last year.
Yeah, you know what I think it was.
To do that, and maybe his, whatever it is, I agree. The youthfulness. It's almost too useful at times. I get that.
And I told Liz Smith, I carry on a conversation with Liz via direct message. He's got to come back on the show. He started out coming on the show, started out coming on Fox. He started out being the guy.
By the way, why is Pete doing well? He is the one guy that does more television than anybody, and will do you, and will do Fox, and will do, of all the candidates, he's the most widest array of media that he does.
He did, but he only did it once, and then he stopped. He stopped playing.
He'll come back to you.
I think he should, because the way you break through is you persuade everybody, every grandparent out there that you are the perfect grandchild.
Well, you know how it works. But you know how it works even on your side of the aisle. Those first four states are heavy on the activist play. The minute Super Tuesday, everything opens up and everything's spread out, and I have a feeling come March, your phone will be ringing.
Now, talk to me a little bit about Super Tuesday, because Bloomberg's money's so astonishing. I can't drive. I'm in California for a week at the Nixon Library. I can't drive without Bloomberg ads.
Well, we're going to find out. I mean, it's funny. I think Bloomberg caught a little bit of a break in Iowa, but he needed something else that he didn't get. I think he needed a big Sanders win. He needed a clear Sanders victory in Iowa, which would have given Sanders a clear victory in New Hampshire, and then the coalescing of the non-socialist wing of the party could get around Bloomberg. The problem Bloomberg has now is if Pete finishes first or second in New Hampshire, and I think he's on a pathway to finish second, and if he finishes first, watch out. And suddenly he does the same thing in Nevada. Well, then Bloomberg, is he going to be spoiler? Is he the guy that takes a three-way race and lets Bernie win because he's the lone progressive, win a bunch of, end up doing a little bit better everywhere because he's splitting vote with Pete? Is that what happened? So I think Super Tuesday is a real, where is Pete? If Pete is the guy coming out, right, and suddenly is the pragmatic, moderate, non-socialist alternative, Bloomberg, it's complicated because if he could end up actually reanimating and helping Sanders.
To play for 1 second the vice presidential game, if Pete Buttigieg pulls this off, who's his vice president? Is he looking for Lloyd Benson circa 2020 right now?
It's interesting. I think it's a woman. I think it's a senior woman. I would say, maybe. I still think he has to pick a person of color. But I think Abrams suddenly is not the good idea for him. He needs somebody with Washington in hand. I don't know. Maybe it's Kamala.
It could very well be
generational. She could make a lot of sense. on some level. I think it's not. Cory Booker could make sense for him on another level, Senator. I do think you're right. You need somebody with probably some Washington title.
It's a difficult. You can go down to the cabinet level in Team Obama. You can start looking around in Team Obama for people like that. Chuck Todd, we will be watching Sunday. If it's Sunday, it's Meet the Press, and this will be quite the Sunday from New Hampshire. Don't miss it. Be right back, America. 1-800-520-1234. What do you think? Call me on the Hugh Hewitt Show. Welcome back, America. Are there enough believers in Pete Buttigieg to make it a race in New Hampshire? He is the monkeys of this campaign. Young, full of energy, kind of offbeat, goofy, but happy. Chuck Todd agrees with me. The monkeys, you have to be generationally literal, but that's what they are. Standing by, President Trump is going to speak at the National Prayer Breakfast. We'll bring you some of that if we get the opportunity. Time for the economic story of the morning, brought to you by AndrewandTodd.com. Andrew Del Rey, Todd Avakian. They are with Sierra Pacific Mortgage. They lend money. They do not, provide you financial advice, although they've got great realtors, east to west. If you're looking to buy near HQ2, they send you to Gordon Wood in Alexandria, Virginia. If you're getting moved from Seattle, you're driving to work right now in Seattle, and you got to move from Seattle to Alexandria, you call up Gordon Wood. Go online, find Gordon Wood. He does the mortgage with AndrewandTodd.com, and everybody wins. Same works everywhere. Cleveland Realtors, Cincinnati Realtors, Seattle Realtors, Los Angeles Realtors, Orange County Realtors, Wealth Advisors. If you want to take money out of your house because you got to pay for college next year. Whatever it is, or you just want to consolidate debt, or maybe you just want to save money because the 10-year Treasury is at 1.65%, meaning that all the rates are in the threes. If you haven't looked in a year, boy, you're a new listener on one of my new markets. I'm getting markets every day. That's great. I love that. Lots of people love breaking news in the morning, the news you need, the analysis you must have. AndrewandTodd.com. Answer a couple questions. I'll be right back to you. 888-888-1172. The biggest story of the day is that investors, according to Bloomberg, are shrugging off the coronavirus. Investors are. Businesses aren't, according to CNN Business. Global stocks are higher for the third day in a row, rebounding from a sell-off triggered by fears of the coronavirus, pushing towards new records. The S&P 500 and NASDAQ both finished Wednesday at all-time highs, even as the virus continues to spread. The key, it only continues to spread in China. China is getting hammered, and Taiwan suspended visas today from Hong Kong and Macau. And the rate of growth inside of China is very, very bad. But it's not so bad at all. Anywhere else, it's not spreading anywhere else. And they may have an antiviral cure worked in Thailand. So that's the economic story of the day. Time to get refinanced. AndrewandTodd.com. Coming up this weekend, it's Thursday. You start making your weekend results, your plans. Do not forget, Created Equal. Great movie about Clarence Thomas. Michael Pack was on yesterday. I'll replay that interview tomorrow or Monday. Director of this groundbreaking documentary. Hours and hours and hours with Justice Thomas, who I've known since 1984. He's a friend. Michael Pack is a great director. It will be moving. The Justice hasn't watched it. Ginny Thomas, his spouse, has. She was moved to tears. So wrongfully assaulted by the left so many years ago. He has walked the walk. He has run his race, and he's continuing to run it, and his laughter still resounds throughout the chambers of the Supreme Court. Doesn't ask many questions. Asked one in honor of his friend Antonin Scalia. Great inspiration in law school campuses everywhere. Visitor to Chapman. Just a wonderful man. His jurisprudence significant. Michael Pack's new movie, Created Equal, in movie theaters everywhere. JusticeThomasMovie.com if you want details. JusticeThomasMovie.com. Jay in Louisville, Kentucky. What's on your mind, Jay? 1-800-520-1234.
Yes, I want to thank you for the pleasure you've given me this week for emphasizing Biden's misery, because I am thoroughly enjoying it. I do have one question.
He is falling like a rock. Go ahead, my friend.
Do you think Trump supporters are more angry with Pelosi or with Romney?
Oh, Pelosi. Look, Governor Romney was never, he acquitted on one, he convicted on the other. It's an irritant to people. It's not a big deal to me. I've known Mitt Romney forever. I said, I disagree with him on the law and the facts. I would have voted to acquit, but he just voted his conscience. And I think people forgive, forget, and move on. The economy, it's the economy, it's the economy. And I don't think people are going to vote for Democrats who are going to destroy this economy. They're going to remember Nancy Pelosi tearing up that speech and dishonoring the Tuskegee Airmen, the family of the man who lost his life, the mother and the son, the reunited military family, the child who got a scholarship. Nancy Pelosi's contemptible action is what leaves a mark. Don't go anywhere, America. It's the Hugh Hewitt Show. Pete Buttigieg music on the Hugh Hewitt Show. Bernie Sanders is ahead in New Hampshire. Pete Buttigieg won Iowa by a whisper, but he won. They both got 11 delegates. It's really a Bernie Buttigieg Bloomberg race. Biden is finished. I know I've been wrong before. People remind me, but I mean, I don't know. He's out of money. No one's giving him money. He's stumbling and bumbling around in New Hampshire, not making a lot of sense, losing his way again. Britt Hume said it. He's just too old. And a lot of people have figured it out. Klobuchar did not get it. And Warren's going to come in fourth in a neighboring state. That's just not going to work. It just seems to me. I just turned on a Washington Post story by Chris Coons, senator from Delaware, about why he will pray in moments for the president. And there is a Mike Bloomberg ad. Mike has taken on the NRA and won. Mike will get it done. He's buying everything. Pretty ugly looking ad, though. I mean, he's mean. Chris Coons' article finishes this way. Because he's about to lay hands on with James Lankford, Donald Trump, and pray for him when the president speaks at the National Prayer Breakfast momentarily. I know that many Americans see Trump as a two-dimensional villain, writes Chris Coons, a person beyond reaching or saving. And I know that publicly praying for him, as I will once again at this year's prayer breakfast, will invite criticism of me. Like anyone else, I don't enjoy that or seek that out. But I believe that the most important expressions of faith are the most difficult ones. I also believe that prayer is about having the humility to know we are all sinners and all fall short of what God would hope for us. Prayer is about restoring our faith in the future, and that righteousness will prevail. Prayer is as much about having hope that we'll be forgiven as it is about forgiving others. Prayer for me is about witnessing to the possibility of repentance and reconciliation even across the most bitter and hardest divides. Chris Coons, a good man, friend of mine. I consider him a friend. Glad he wrote this piece. I tweeted it out for you. Had lunch yesterday with a really extraordinary fella. He is a counselor to parents of extraordinary children. And they can be extraordinary in the arts more often than not. They're extraordinary, or they may be extraordinary in sports. And that's a very difficult road to go. Because if you've got a kid who's got the Bigfoot, remember Bobby Bigfoot I coached years ago in soccer. If you've got the athlete who's going to get a Division I scholarship, but he or she's 8 years old and you've got 10 years to have to worry about that, and you've got to balance being a parent and their academics and their athletics, or you got a cello player who is just blown out of nowhere. If you've got a child gifted in art or music or athletics, or you have special needs, the parents, every child needs a parent, every parent needs a coach. And my friend, and if you ever need him, just send me a direct message or tweet at me and I'll connect you up with him, was telling me the most important thing for parents is that they have someone they can talk to. And I believe what Chris Coons is saying here about prayer is true. No one's got the complete package. Nobody's got the complete package of everything. There's Mike Pence, by the way, at the prayer breakfast, talking animatedly, always there. I've never been to the National Prayer Breakfast. One of these years I'll go. Vice President is already there. The president has arrived. It's always at the Washington Hilton. Famed. Fetching Miss Hugh and I lived across the street from it in the early 80s. She was there when President Reagan was shot. I was in law school at the time. But Kevin McCarthy will speak, and Harvard professor, Washington Post columnist, and then the President of the United States will give remarks, and then the closing prayers. It's all on Fox News if you want to watch that. Bob in Texas. What say you, Bob?
Hi, Hugh. This is the villainous actuary.
I have not heard from the villainous actuary in a long time. Bob, welcome. 1-800-520-1234. You know, I got new audiences all over the country. They won't know about the villainous actuary.
Well, I know that goes back to 2009 with Nancy Pelosi's comment about people who opposed Obamacare. But I haven't called because I'm retired now, and I normally don't get up early enough to listen to you in the morning anymore, but I wanted to comment on your strategy of voting for Bernie. I think it's a good strategy. I told your screener that I have been talking to friends about voting for Bernie in the Texas primary upcoming just because I think it's the smart thing to do. I think it would be like voting for Hillary, and 2008 against Obama, which I also did, even though I would never, ever vote for any Democrat in a general election.
You know, it is dangerous because Bernie does elicit a great deal of grassroots support. But I believe in clarity before agreement. I believe in the clearest choice possible.
Well, I agree with that. And your comment about Chris Coons reminded me of something that I heard about Trump. You've probably heard it too. The comment was, he's not a godly man, but he's God's man. And I think just like God chose Moses and Paul and King David, he doesn't always pick the people you would expect him to, but I think Trump has done a phenomenal job as president.
Selena Zito's book has a chapter on the King Cyrus Christians. That means that there are a whole bunch of voters in the country who would, like me, self-identify as an evangelical. Some of them are Protestant, some of them are Catholic, some of them are Mormon, but they all identify themselves as evangelical. And they identify not necessarily with the president's character or his habits or his past, but they identify with the fact he's for religious liberty and he's appointing the right kind of judges.
Absolutely.
You know what he's doing right now? He's holding up the Washington Post. Trump acquitted. He's at the National Prayer Breakfast. He's just holding up the headline, Trump acquitted. He is a showman, isn't he? All right, Mary in St. Petersburg, Florida. Mary, good morning.
Good morning. I just wanted to ask a question, please, about the shadow app that was used in the Iowa voting.
Yes.
Owned by campaign manager of Pete Buttigieg's wife.
Well, apparently, I don't really know, but apparently. Go ahead, Mary.
Oh, I was just wondering if it already looks like they're setting the 2020 election up to kind of look like it's fixed somehow.
Well, you know, I don't think it is. Chuck Colson, are you a religious person, by the way, Mary?
Oh, yes.
Okay. You know who Chuck Colson is?
Yes.
Okay. Chuck told me once, no conspiracy involving anything to do with Washington, D.C. can last 3 days. And that's because he was involved in one. And there is no conspiracy. There is no dark side. There is no deep state. There are a bunch of bumbling, sometimes corrupt, occasionally and often incompetent individuals who get a hook. In this case, there appears to have been a favor done for a favor done for a favor done, and they got themselves a terrible app, and they're embarrassed, and they're probably going to lose the caucus.
Okay.
And now I want to jump in because we're getting the formal introduction of the.
We thank all gathered at this prayer breakfast for lifting our voices for the poor and the persecuted, the millions who are missing or murdered because of their faith. Let us pray for the Panchen Lama and all the Tibetan Buddhists in prison in China or missing for following their faith. Let us pray for Sanubar Torsun and the 1 to 3 million Uyghurs in China forced from their homes and incarcerated in camps. Let us pray for Arif Badawi in Saudi Arabia and all the writers and religious.
All right, bring me up for a second. I want people to know this is Speaker Pelosi praying. Back to Speaker Pelosi.
Uban Antonius in Eritrea and the priests, rabbis, pastors, and religious leaders around the world whose freedoms have been stolen because of what they believe. Let us pray for the victims of anti-Semitism, including those whose lives were brutally taken at the Tree of Life Synagogue and in places of worship and communities around the world. And let us pray for the countless Yazidis, Rohingyas, Muslims, and other religious minorities, often unseen and unnamed, who have been abducted, oppressed, and abused because of who they are and what they believe, their faith. Let us pray for that the names of the persecuted always live on our lips, and their courage carried through our actions. And let us pray that we honor the spark and divinity in them and in all people, including ourselves, and that we treat everyone with dignity and respect. Let us pray that we never become immune to the atrocities that continue to challenge the collective conscience of our shared humanity. For us today, people of faith, leaders, lawmakers, and activists who can mobilize the public, we pray that the moral clarity of faith moves us to demand justice for those who are suffering. And we pray that commercial interests never blind us to the ongoing human rights struggle fought by so many throughout the world. Let us raise our voices in prayer as one in this struggle for freedom. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost.
Okay, Nancy Pelosi using the Holy Ghost traditional approach. Catholics say Holy Spirit now, but Nancy Pelosi is a Catholic. 1-800-520-1234. Who's up next? Let's go back to it. Picking up the Fox News feed. I just wanted to hear what they said to bridge the president. Because now comes the introduction of the president.
Thank you, Tom. These verses from Deuteronomy are part of a prayer that we as Jews are commanded to recite twice a day called the Shema. The importance of this prayer is said in the very first line. The Lord is our God, the Lord is one. This prayer, which has become so central to the Jewish people, beautifully discusses ways in which our faith should be lived out and announces our declaration of faith in God. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Hear, O Israel, the Lord is our God, the Lord is one. And you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul, with all your means. And these words which I command you this day shall be upon your heart, and you shall teach them to your sons, and speak of them when you sit in your house, and when you walk on the way, and when you lie down, and when you rise up.
Well said, Rabbi. When we come back, if the president is speaking, I will, of course, bring you his remarks. Now, let me tell you about Honor Bound Coffee. I have the dark roast in the studio because I need a little jolt in the morning. I got the light roast at home. The Fetching Mrs. Hewitt likes a little bit. It's wonderful coffee. Now supporting military families with 100% of their profits. You can get espresso, drip, French press, or whole grain grind. I go for the drip grind. I believe that anyone who drinks coffee ought to subscribe to Honor Bound Coffee. I genuinely believe you ought to go and do that and stop. Look, the coffee companies in the world are never going to go broke, but the military families out there need help. And I know Pete and Seth Talbot. I trust them. 100% of the profits at the beginning are going to Semper Fi Fund, 100%. So please go to honorboundcoffee.com, all one word, honorboundcoffee.com today and subscribe. 2 for 1 at the start, by the way, first order. Don't forget relieffactor.com. Third time of the day, you're going out the door in Seattle. 5:45 in Seattle. Going out the door in LA, San Francisco. Turn around, go back. Get your relieffactor.com. Get it to work for you every morning. I remind you at this time, I carry Kirkman, Resveratrol, Omega. You need it. Everybody needs it. Everybody knows they need it. Everybody knows they ought to order it. Everybody knows they ought to take it. And all I do is remind you every day, 3 times a day, relieffactor.com, relieffactor.com, relieffactor.com. Don't go anywhere, 1-800-520-1234. If the president is speaking, I'll bring you a little bit of his remarks in the last segment of today's Hugh Hewitt Show.
Portions of the Hugh Hewitt Show brought to you in part by Created Equal, Clarence Thomas, in his own words.
Welcome back, America. It's Hugh Hewitt. That's Pete Buttigieg music. The monkeys of politics, if you're generationally challenged. Understand it was a fake group that was put together by a group of television executives to make a show out of, and they became a hit. Chuck Todd agrees with me. It's the perfect analogy to what actually is happening. Kevin McCarthy now speaking at the National Prayer Breakfast, so we probably won't hear the president this morning. Let's hear from you, though. James in Eureka, California. Good morning, James. What say you?
Good morning, Neil.
Good morning.
Hey, I'm just wondering how Speaker Pelosi can talk about being religious and all this while she can't even stand up for the ending the late-term abortion.
I do not know. It's not for me to judge, but it is seemingly inconsistent with Catholicism. James, thank you. Debbie, Minneapolis, Minnesota. Hello, Debbie. Got a hot dish this morning? Debbie, you there? Oh, Debbie, you've got your radio on, don't you? Either that or you've got a cell phone and you're lost in the middle of Fargo somewhere. Michael in San Antonio. Michael, what say you?
I thought the Catholicism and politics issue was answered with Jack Kennedy.
Well, it was.
Well, then, it's all moot. If Nancy Pelosi can be a Catholic and still have the surroundings that she's surrounded by, then the religion has no meaning at all anyway.
Well, that's not true. Catholicism has a great teaching, doctrine, repository of faith. That some people depart from it in public life is not a shock. But, Michael, thank you for the call on K-Loop. Denise, Columbus, Ohio, calling on 98.9 FM, The Answer, news, opinion, passion, in the home of the Dog Pound in their march to Super Bowl 55.
Hello?
Are you laughing, Denise?
Yeah, I was, yes. Yes, I was.
Denise,
that was good.
We are on the
How
way.
Are you this morning?
We're on the way to Super Bowl 55. It's just reset. Everyone's back at the same thing. Congratulations to the Chiefs. That was last year. This is the Browns' year.
Yes, I hope so. I hope so.
You're still laughing, Denise.
I can't help it.
All right, go ahead.
If you're a Browns fan, you know.
Yep.
I just wanted to say that in listening to Nancy Pelosi's prayer, and the line that really stuck out for me was the dignity and respect. And if she could only live by those words and not behave like she did,
and you've set me up. They're trying to make it equivalent that the president didn't shake hands with her.
No,
I do not believe he saw her extend her hand. And even if he did,
I agree with you.
It was clear as a bell. He did not see it. She stood behind him where he could not see it and methodically tore up a speech that honored great Americans. Honestly, she should have apologized this morning. That would have been appropriate. Thank you, Denise. I have a sign here on my desk, Tridelts for Trump. That means that the captivating Mrs. Campbell was in the studio recently. I'll be seeing her for dinner tonight. And I will bring up the fact that, once again, this is an assault on me. A USC Tridelt is an assault on me. Every time they come into the studio, they leave that. And I will not let that shall not stand. That just shall not stand. David, Arthur Brooks is now introducing the president. Let's listen to a little bit of Arthur. Oh, they didn't go to him. That's too bad. David in San Diego, California.
Hey, Hugh. Good morning.
Good morning.
Love your show.
Thank you.
I just wanted to say, when I saw Pelosi turn up that speech, it made my blood boil. But I think Pence missed a huge opportunity there to gain respect from someone like myself to not stop her. I think if he would have grabbed her arm and said, "You know what? You're not going to do this. We're not going to allow you to do that." I think he would have gained a lot of respect and a lot of support.
No. Wait, David. You cannot grab a fellow legislator in the House. That the decorum was badly enough broken when she tore up the speech. You may not physically touch a member in the House unless it is a gesture of accord.
Well, that's fine, but I think people need. I think people are afraid to be confrontational nowadays. But I
well,
think
that would have been a
reason,
disaster. Never touch anyone. It's battery. Unpermitted touching is a crime in almost every jurisdiction with which I am aware. You can confront people civilly, graciously. Mike Pence might have wagged a finger at her. He might have shook his head demonstratively, but that's about all I would have done. Let me conclude by saying thank you, Ben. Thank you, Adam. Thank you, Generalissimo. A couple of you are wondering, who was I talking to yesterday? If you want to know the coach of parents of exceptionally gifted athletic children and musicians are, just write to me. His name is Scott Bullock, and I can connect you to him. But it's a rough way to go. If you've got a gifted athlete at age 7, 8, 9, the next 10 years are going to be hard. Every child needs a parent. Every parent needs a coach. That's what Scott does. I'll have him on sometime to explain how you walk that road. He's been down it himself, and you can really mess up your kid if you're not careful, so be careful. There's a God element of that. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you get to hear President Trump's National Day of Prayer speech. He speaks to the nation at noon today. I'll be back tomorrow with the next Hugh Hewitt Show.